On May 14, 1845, a respected physician arrived at a Louisiana plantation to deliver what he assumed would be another wealthy planter's grandchild. What he found instead was a woman barely 20 years old, pregnant with her fourth child in 5 years, each one fathered by a different slave selected by her own father. She was not alone. Her two sisters, confined to separate rooms in the same wing of the mansion, were in identical circumstances. When the physician demanded an explanation, the colonel showed him something that made his blood run cold. Leather-bound ledgers documenting 3 generations of controlled breeding, anthropometric measurements taken with calipers and rulers, and detailed genealogical charts mapping the bloodlines of his own family mixed systematically with those of his slaves. The colonel called it his life's work. He called his daughters patriots. He called their children the future of the South. But the most disturbing revelation came when the physician realized that the colonel's daughters were not his biological children at all. They were the products of his father's identical experiments decades earlier. Before we continue with the story of Dr. Samuel Harrington and what he discovered at Bellevue Plantation, if you're fascinated by the darkest secrets hidden in American history, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. And tell us in the comments, what state are you listening from right now? We read every single one. The horror at Bellevue Plantation would force one man to choose between exposing the truth and protecting his own life. Dr. Samuel Harrington had built his reputation in New Orleans, treating both the wealthy merchants of the French Quarter and the desperate immigrants crowding the docks. At 42 years old, he had performed countless deliveries, set broken bones in back alleys, and treated yellow fever victims during the epidemic of 1841. He had seen poverty, violence, and death in forms that would break lesser men. But he considered himself, above all else, a man of science and reason. He was also, though he kept it carefully hidden, a quiet supporter of the American Anti-Slavery Society. He had attended exactly 2 meetings in Philadelphia during his medical training, both times sitting in the back, both times leaving before anyone could engage him in conversation that might be remembered. In New Orleans, such affiliations could destroy a medical practice overnight or worse. So he kept his opinions to himself, treated the slaves of wealthy families with the same care he gave their masters, and told himself that small mercies were better than none. The letter that arrived on May 12th was written in elegant script on expensive paper. Colonel Thaddeus Crane of Bellevue Plantation requested his immediate presence for a difficult delivery. The fee offered was extraordinary, 3 times his usual rate, and the tone suggested both urgency and absolute discretion. Harrington had heard the Crane name before. Old Louisiana money, a family that claimed lineage back to the earliest French settlers, though Thaddeus himself was known to be an Englishman who had married into the family 30 years prior. Bellevue Plantation sat 40 miles upriver from New Orleans, accessible only by boat or a full day's ride on horseback, through roads that turned to swamp during heavy rain. Harrington chose the boat, a small paddle steamer that made weekly runs delivering supplies to the river plantations. The journey took 6 hours, and he spent most of it reading a medical journal and trying to ignore the oppressive humidity that made his shirt stick to his skin. The other passengers were a mix of merchants, overseers, and a Methodist minister who spent the entire journey reading his Bible and occasionally glancing at Harrington with the suspicious look that religious men often reserved for physicians. Medicine and faith had always maintained an uneasy relationship in the South. As the boat rounded a bend in the river, Bellevue came into view. The main house stood 3 stories tall, built in the federal style with white columns that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Live oaks draped with Spanish moss lined the approach from the river, creating a tunnel of green shadow. Behind the main house, Harrington could see the regular rows of slave cabins, perhaps 40 or 50 in total, and beyond those, the endless fields of sugarcane that represented the plantation's wealth. A slave waited at the dock, a young man perhaps 20 years old, well dressed in clean clothes that marked him as a house servant. He took Harrington's bag without speaking and led him up the shell-covered path toward the mansion. The doctor noticed immediately how quiet everything was. In his experience, plantations were rarely silent. There should have been voices from the fields, the sound of work, the calls of overseers. Instead, there was only the buzz of insects and the distant cry of a bird he could not identify. The front door opened before they reached it. A white woman stood in the doorway, perhaps 50 years old, dressed in black silk, despite the heat. Her face had the tight, controlled expression of someone who had learned long ago to hide whatever she truly felt. "Dr. Harrington, I am Constance Crane, the Colonel's wife. Thank you for coming so quickly." Her voice was cultured, with the soft accent of old New Orleans families. She did not offer her hand. "My husband is waiting for you in his study. I will have someone show you to your room afterward. I trust your journey was not too taxing." The pleasantries felt rehearsed, performed because custom demanded them, but carrying no genuine warmth. Harrington had learned to read such things in his years treating the wealthy. This woman was afraid of something. "The journey was fine, Mrs. Crane." The letter mentioned a difficult delivery. Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify. "My husband will explain everything, if you will follow me." She led him through a wide entrance hall, decorated with oil paintings of stern-faced men and women, each portrait marked with small brass plaques bearing names and dates. The Crane family going back generations. The house smelled of beeswax and old wood, with an underlying scent he could not quite place. Something medicinal, perhaps laudanum or another tincture. Colonel Thaddeus Crane's study occupied the entire east corner of the house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, packed with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with papers, instruments that looked vaguely scientific, and 3 leather ledgers stacked precisely one atop the other. Behind the desk sat a man who appeared to be in his early 60s, thin and upright with silver hair combed back from a high forehead. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they fixed on Harrington with an intensity that was immediately unsettling. "Dr. Harrington, please, sit." The Colonel's voice carried the crisp consonants of educated English, though years in Louisiana had softened some of the edges. He gestured to a chair positioned directly across from him. "I appreciate your prompt response to my letter. What I'm about to share with you requires both your medical expertise and your absolute discretion. Before we proceed, I need your word as a gentleman that nothing discussed in this room will be repeated to anyone outside this plantation." Harrington felt the first cold thread of unease. "Colonel Crane, I am bound by my oath as a physician to maintain patient confidentiality. However, if what you are about to tell me involves harm to any person, I cannot promise silence." The Colonel smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Harm is such a subjective term, Doctor. What some might call harm, others might call progress. What some might call cruelty, others might call necessity." He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Tell me, Dr. Harrington, what do you know of heredity, of the transmission of traits from parent to child?" "I know what any educated physician knows. Certain characteristics appear to run in families. Eye color, height, predisposition to certain ailments." "Precisely. And if such traits can be observed and documented, might they not also be controlled, selected for, enhanced through careful planning?" The Colonel turned back to face him. "For the past 50 years, my family has been conducting an experiment in selective breeding. Not with horses or cattle, Doctor, but with human beings." The room seemed to grow colder despite the heat. Harrington felt his stomach tighten. "I am not sure I understand what you mean." "Oh, I think you understand perfectly well." The Colonel returned to his desk and opened the first ledger. Even from across the desk, Harrington could see pages filled with cramped handwriting, diagrams, and what appeared to be family trees. "My father began this work in 1795. He was a man of science, a student of the natural philosophers, and he became obsessed with a simple question: Could the best traits of the African slave, their physical strength and endurance, be combined with the intelligence and refinement of white blood to create superior workers? Not merely slaves, Doctor, but a new category of human being, stronger than any white man, more intelligent than any pure African, and absolutely loyal to the families that created them. Harrington's mouth had gone dry. That is not medicine, Colonel. That is an abomination. Is it? The Colonel's pale eyes gleamed. We breed dogs for specific traits. We crossbreed crops to improve yields. Why should human improvement be any different? My father spent 30 years on his initial experiments. He selected slave women based on specific criteria: height, symmetry of features, lack of visible scarring or deformity. He then fathered children with these women and documented every aspect of their development. Physical measurements taken monthly, cognitive assessments, temperament evaluations, all recorded in these ledgers. He tapped the books on his desk with one finger. The results were remarkable, Doctor. The offspring showed hybrid vigor. They were indeed stronger, more intelligent, more capable than either parent race. But my father discovered something else, something he had not anticipated. The most successful combinations came not from first-generation crossings, but from second and third generations, from taking the daughters of those unions and breeding them with carefully selected partners. Harrington stood abruptly. I will have no part in this madness. I came here to deliver a child, not to participate in some twisted experiment. Sit down, Doctor. The Colonel's voice turned cold. You came here because I paid you to come. You will listen to what I have to say, and then you will perform your duties as a physician. The alternative is that you will not leave Bellevue Plantation alive. Do I make myself clear? For a long moment the two men stared at each other. Harrington could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. He thought of the boat that had brought him, already continuing upriver. He thought of the 40 miles of swamp and plantation land between himself and New Orleans. He thought of the complete isolation of this place, the silence he had noticed when he arrived. Slowly he sat back down. A wise choice. The Colonel's tone softened slightly, taking on the quality of a lecturer addressing a student. Now, as I was explaining, my father's work yielded fascinating results, but he made one critical error. He treated his experimental subjects as property, as slaves. This created resentment, attempts at escape, even one case of infanticide when a mother killed her own child rather than see it raised in bondage. My father died in 1823, and I inherited both his plantation and his research. He opened the second ledger. I spent 5 years studying his notes, his failures and successes. And I realized that the problem was not with the science, but with the methodology. The women in the experiment had to be willing participants, or at least believe themselves to be. They had to see their children not as products of rape, but as legitimate heirs. So I devised a different approach. The Colonel turned the ledger around so Harrington could see. The page showed a detailed family tree, branches connecting names with careful notation of dates, physical characteristics, and something labeled cognitive rating. I needed to create a situation where white women of good breeding would willingly bear children with selected slaves. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. I would raise daughters, my own daughters, in complete isolation from the outside world. I would educate them, yes, but also condition them to believe that their highest purpose, their sacred duty, was to bear strong children for the future of the plantation. I would control every aspect of their lives, every thought, every belief, until the idea of refusing would be unthinkable. Harrington felt bile rising in his throat. You are talking about your own children. No, Doctor. The Colonel's smile returned. I am talking about my father's children. The 3 young women currently in the East Wing were all born from my father's experiments. My role has been merely to continue the work, to raise them as a father would, and to guide them toward fulfilling their purpose. They call me father. They believe I am their father. But in truth, they are my half-sisters, the daughters my father produced in the final years of his life before his death. The implication crashed over Harrington like a physical wave. You are breeding your own half-sisters. I am continuing vital research, the colonel corrected, and the results have exceeded even my most optimistic predictions. In the past 5 years, my daughters have produced 11 children. 9 have survived. Each one is being raised with meticulous care, documented at every stage of development, and doctor, they are magnificent. Stronger than any white child, more intelligent than any slave child I have ever encountered. They learn languages with ease. They display artistic talent. They are beautiful, every single one of them. He closed the ledger and fixed Harrington with those pale, cold eyes. But more importantly, they are mine. Born on this plantation, raised by my daughters who know no other life. They are absolutely loyal. In 10 years, when the oldest reaches maturity, I will have workers who can read, write, calculate, and perform skilled labor, yet who will never question their place in the world. They will be more valuable than any pure slave, yet they will cost nothing to acquire. Do you understand the economic implications, Doctor? The social implications? I understand that you have created a nightmare, Harrington said, his voice shaking. You have trapped 3 women in a cycle of forced pregnancy, producing children who will grow up as slaves, despite carrying your own blood. They carry my father's blood, not mine, the colonel said sharply, and they are not slaves. They will be freed upon reaching maturity, given papers, even a small sum of money. They will be free people of color, able to work as skilled laborers throughout the South. Some might even pass for white, allowing them to infiltrate society at levels impossible for ordinary freed slaves. The full scope of the horror was beginning to dawn on Harrington. You plan to place them in other families, in households, in businesses. I plan to create a network, the colonel said softly. Other planters have already expressed interest in my methods. 3 of my granddaughters, the ones with the lightest complexions, have already been placed in prominent families in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Raised as orphaned relatives, adopted charity cases from distant cousins. No one questions their lineage. No one suspects. In 20 years, there could be hundreds like them throughout the South, in positions of trust, in positions of power, yet ultimately loyal to those who created them. Harrington felt as though the room was tilting. Why are you telling me this? Why bring me here? Because my eldest daughter is in her 8th month of pregnancy, and her previous deliveries have been increasingly difficult. I need a skilled physician to ensure both mother and child survive. You come with excellent recommendations, Dr. Harrington. And you come from New Orleans, far enough away that you have no connections to the local families, no one to whisper secrets to. The colonel leaned forward. You will deliver this child. You will ensure the health of my daughters, and you will say nothing to anyone about what you have learned here. In exchange, I will pay you handsomely and allow you to return to your practice in New Orleans. And if I refuse, then you will not leave Bellevue at all. Your body will be discovered weeks from now, another unfortunate victim of one of the many accidents that befall travelers in the Louisiana swamps. Tragic, but not uncommon. Do we have an understanding? The silence stretched between them. Outside, through the study window, Harrington could see the sun beginning to set, turning the river to gold. A beautiful evening in hell. Take me to the patient, he said finally. The colonel stood, satisfaction evident on his face. I knew you were a reasonable man, Dr. Harrington. Mrs. Crane will show you to the East Wing. I will join you shortly to make introductions. As Harrington followed Constance Crane through the mansion's corridors, his mind was racing. He had to find a way out of this. He had to expose what was happening here. But first, he had to survive long enough to leave the plantation alive. And he had to see for himself if the colonel's monstrous claims were actually true. What he found in the East Wing would prove that the truth was somehow even worse than he had imagined. The East Wing of Bellevue Plantation had been converted into what could only be described as a medicalized prison. The hallway was clean, almost sterile, with whitewashed walls and doors evenly spaced along its length. Each door had a small window set at eye level, covered from the inside with curtains. The air smelled of lavender water and something else, something clinical that reminded Harrington of the charity hospital in New Orleans. Constance Crane stopped at the first door. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. "This is Eliza," she said quietly. "She is 22 years old. This will be her 4th child. You are aware of what is happening here," Harrington said. It was not a question. The older woman's jaw tightened. "I am aware that I am the Colonel's wife, and that my duty is to manage his household. I am aware that there are aspects of my husband's work that I find deeply troubling, and I am aware that speaking such thoughts aloud would accomplish nothing except to make me complicit in ways I am not currently complicit." She met his eyes. "I do what I can, Doctor. I ensure the girls are comfortable. I provide them with books, with music, with whatever small comforts are possible within the constraints of their situation. It is not much, but it is something." Before Harrington could respond, she opened the door. The room beyond was larger than he had expected, perhaps 20 feet square, with a high ceiling and tall windows that let in the fading sunlight. It was furnished comfortably, almost luxuriously. A large 4-poster bed with clean linens, a writing desk, bookshelves filled with volumes, and a sitting area with cushioned chairs. The walls were decorated with watercolor paintings of gardens and pastoral scenes. If not for the bars on the windows, barely visible behind lace curtains, it might have been a pleasant guest room in any wealthy home. A young woman sat in one of the chairs, her hands resting on the pronounced swell of her belly. She looked up when they entered, and Harrington felt his breath catch in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal. Her skin was the color of honey, lighter than any slave he had seen, but darker than any white woman. Her features were delicate, symmetrical, with high cheekbones and large dark eyes that held an expression of cautious intelligence. Her hair, thick and wavy, was pulled back in a simple style that emphasized the elegant line of her neck. She was also clearly terrified. "Eliza," Constance said gently, "this is Dr. Harrington. He has come from New Orleans to help with the delivery." The young woman stood slowly, moving with the careful deliberation of someone heavily pregnant. "Good evening, Doctor. I apologize for not rising sooner. The baby has been quite active today." Her voice was educated, with the careful pronunciation of someone who had learned to speak from books. Harrington found his voice. "Please, do not trouble yourself. May I ask how you are feeling?" "Tired," she said simply. "The last delivery was difficult. I bled more than I should have, or so Mother Constance tells me. Father worries that this time may be even harder." She said it matter-of-factly as though discussing the weather. "Father," Harrington repeated. "You mean Colonel Crane?" "Of course. Who else would I mean?" She tilted her head slightly, puzzled by the question. Constance cleared her throat. "Doctor, perhaps you should examine the patient. I will leave you to your work. Eliza, if you need anything, ring the bell, and someone will come immediately." After the older woman left, Harrington stood in uncomfortable silence. Professional detachment had always been his strength as a physician, but this situation violated every assumption he had built his career upon. "You may examine me, Doctor," Eliza said. "I am accustomed to it. Father has physicians visit regularly to document the pregnancies. You are the third I have met." She moved to the bed and lay back, arranging her dress modestly. Harrington approached with his medical bag, pulling out his stethoscope. As he conducted the examination, listening to the baby's heartbeat, checking her pulse and blood pressure, he struggled to find words that would not either shatter her world or make him complicit in the horror. The baby's heartbeat was strong and regular. The position felt good, head down and engaged. But Eliza's pulse was elevated, and he could feel tension in her abdomen that suggested extreme stress. "The baby seems healthy," he said carefully, "but I am concerned about you. Your pulse is rapid. Are you sleeping well?" "I sleep as well as can be expected," she said. The baby moves constantly at night, and I worry sometimes about what will happen after the delivery. What do you mean? She looked at him with those dark, intelligent eyes. The other children are taken away after 6 weeks. Father says it is necessary that they must be raised together to form proper bonds. I understand the logic, but it is difficult to give them up after carrying them for 9 months. Harrington felt cold spreading through his chest. You have given up 3 children already? 3 living, she corrected. The first pregnancy ended at 5 months. Father said it was common for first pregnancies to fail. The second delivery produced a healthy son. He will be 3 years old now. I am not permitted to see him, but Mother Constance tells me he is well, that he is strong and clever. A flicker of emotion crossed her face, quickly suppressed. The third and fourth were daughters. They are 1 and 2 years old. This will be my 5th child. 5 pregnancies in 5 years. Harrington felt rage building in his throat. Miss Eliza, forgive my directness, but do you understand the circumstances of these pregnancies? Do you understand who the fathers are? She looked at him as though he had asked a profoundly stupid question. Of course I understand, Doctor. Father explained everything to us when we reached maturity. We are part of a great work, an experiment that will change the future of the South. The men chosen as fathers are selected for their physical perfection and strength. Our children will combine the best of both races, creating a new category of human being that will ensure the prosperity of our family and the stability of the social order. And you believe this? You accept this? Why would I not? She seemed genuinely puzzled. Father has raised us with love and care. He has educated us far beyond what most women receive. He has explained the scientific principles underlying his work. We are not slaves, Doctor. We are participants in something larger than ourselves. Our children will be freed when they reach maturity. They will have opportunities that neither pure white nor pure black children could ever have. The brainwashing was complete, Harrington realized with growing horror. She truly believed everything she was saying. The colonel had not merely forced his half-sisters into this nightmare, he had conditioned them to accept it, even embrace it, as their highest purpose. Miss Eliza, he said slowly, has anyone ever told you that you have a choice in this matter, that you could refuse? For the first time, something like fear flickered across her face. Refuse? Why would I refuse? What would I do? Where would I go? Her voice rose slightly. Father has given us everything, this house, this education, this purpose. Without him, we would be nothing. We would have nothing. A knock at the door interrupted them. Colonel Crane entered without waiting for permission. Dr. Harrington, I trust you find the patient in good health? Harrington straightened, forcing his expression to neutrality. The baby is well positioned, but Miss Eliza shows signs of significant stress. Her previous deliveries have weakened her. Another pregnancy so soon after the last could be dangerous. Noted, the colonel said dismissively. However, the breeding schedule cannot be interrupted. Once this child is delivered and she is recovered sufficiently, she will be paired with the next selected male. We have a timetable to maintain. Eliza said nothing, simply arranged her dress and returned to her sitting position as though this exchange was perfectly normal. I should like to examine your other daughters as well, Harrington said. If I am to manage their deliveries, I should assess their overall health. Of course, Mother Constance will show you to their rooms, but first, Doctor, I think you should see the results of our work. I want you to understand exactly what we are creating here. The colonel led him out of Eliza's room and down the hallway to a locked door at the far end. He produced a key from his pocket and opened it, revealing a staircase leading down. The nursery is in the basement, he explained as they descended. Climate controlled, as much as possible in this heat. Away from the main living areas to prevent disruption. The children require a great deal of attention and supervision. The basement had been converted into a series of connected rooms, each one painted white and filled with small beds, toys, and educational materials. In the main room, 9 children ranging in age from infant to perhaps 4 years old were engaged in various activities under the watchful eyes of 2 slave women. But it was the children themselves that made Harrington stop in his tracks. They were beautiful, disturbingly so. Each one showed the same careful blending of features that marked Eliza: the honey-colored skin, the delicate bone structure, the large, intelligent eyes. The older children were reading from primers far advanced for their apparent ages. A 3-year-old girl was working through arithmetic problems on a small chalkboard. A 2-year-old boy was building complex structures with wooden blocks, his small hands moving with remarkable dexterity. "You see, Doctor?" The colonel's voice was thick with pride. "This is what I have created. Superior specimens in every measurable way. Stronger than white children, more intelligent than slave children, and absolutely controllable because they know nothing else." One of the older children, a girl perhaps 4 years old, approached them. She curtsied with perfect form. "Good evening, grandfather. Have you come to test us?" "Not today, my dear. I am showing the doctor our progress." "Have you finished your lessons?" "Yes, grandfather. I've completed the 2nd-level reader and practiced my penmanship for 1 hour. Mistress Clara says my letters are improving." "Excellent. You may return to your play." The girl curtsied again and returned to the other children. Her movements were graceful, controlled, and utterly unchildlike. "They call you grandfather," Harrington said. "They are my grandchildren, Doctor. The daughters of my daughters, though they do not need to understand the complexities of that relationship yet. When they are older, they will be told their mothers were distant relatives who died in childbirth. They will be raised to understand their place in the world, neither wholly white nor wholly black, but something new, something better." Harrington watched the children playing, their laughter sounding almost normal, except for the controlled, measured quality of it. They were being raised as specimens, as experiments, as products. Even their joy was managed and documented. "How many plantations are participating in this program?" he asked quietly. The colonel smiled. "Currently, 5, including Bellevue. But the number grows every year. Word spreads quietly among certain circles. Men of vision, Doctor. Men who understand that the future of the South depends not merely on maintaining the current social order, but on improving it, on creating a permanent underclass that is superior to current slaves yet still controllable, still dependent on their masters." "And the children who have been placed in white families?" 3 so far, all girls. The lightest skinned of the crop, those who can pass for white with only the slightest questions. They are being raised as orphaned relatives in prominent families in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Natchez. When they reach maturity, they will marry well, bringing our carefully cultivated bloodlines into the highest levels of society. Their children will be even lighter, even more acceptable. In 3 generations, Doctor, I will have succeeded in infiltrating the aristocracy of the entire Gulf Coast. The scope of it was staggering. Harrington felt as though he were falling into an abyss. "You plan to destroy the social order you claim to be protecting." "I plan to preserve it," the colonel corrected. "Slavery as it currently exists cannot last forever. The abolitionists grow stronger every year. War may even come, though I hope we can avoid such extremes. But when slavery ends, as it inevitably must, what then? How do we maintain the economic and social structure that has made the South wealthy? The answer is simple. We create a new category of human being, free in name, but bound by upbringing and circumstance to serve the families that created them, grateful for their position, incapable of imagining any other life." He gestured to the playing children. "These children will never rebel. They will never seek to rise above their station. They have been designed, Doctor, from conception to adulthood, to be perfect servants, perfect workers, and because they will be legally free, there will be no moral objection to their status. The North will have nothing to protest." Harrington closed his eyes, fighting the nausea rising in his throat. The colonel's plan was monstrous, but it was also frighteningly plausible. If this work continued, if other planters adopted the same methods, it could indeed reshape Southern society in ways that would persist for generations. "I should like to examine your other daughters now," he said, opening his eyes. "If I am to provide medical care, I need to assess all of my patients." The colonel studied him for a long moment, those pale eyes searching for any sign of weakness or defiance. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But remember, Dr. Harrington, you are here as a physician, not as a judge. Your role is to ensure successful deliveries and healthy children, nothing more." As they climbed the stairs back to the main level, Harrington's mind was already working. He had to find a way to expose this horror. He had to find evidence that would convince the authorities in New Orleans to act, and he had to do it without getting himself killed in the process. The examination of the other two daughters revealed the same pattern. Caroline, age 20, had delivered 2 children and was currently 4 months pregnant with her third. She exhibited the same careful conditioning as Eliza, the same absolute belief in the righteousness of her father's work, and the same underlying terror, carefully hidden but visible to Harrington's trained eye in the tension around her mouth, the way her hands sometimes trembled before she controlled them. The youngest daughter, Margaret, was 18 and pregnant for the first time. She was more nervous than her sisters, asking questions about the delivery process with an innocence that was heartbreaking. She had been educated to believe that bearing children for her father's experiments was her sacred duty, but she was still frightened of the pain and risk. Harrington found himself automatically offering reassurances, then hating himself for providing comfort that might make her more compliant. By the time he had examined all 3 women, darkness had fallen outside. Constance Crane showed him to a guest room on the 2nd floor, well away from the east wing. The room was comfortable with a bed, washstand, and a window that looked out over the darkened fields. The window, he noted, was not barred. He was not considered a prisoner, merely a guest who knew better than to leave. Dinner was brought to his room by a slave girl who would not meet his eyes. She set the tray down, curtsied, and left without speaking. The food was excellent. Plantation fare of roasted chicken, rice, and vegetables, but Harrington barely tasted it. His mind kept returning to those 9 children in the basement, playing under supervision, their entire lives mapped out before them. He considered his options. He could try to escape tonight, make his way through the fields to the river, attempt to flag down a passing boat. But the colonel would have anticipated that possibility. There would be overseers watching, dogs perhaps, and even if he made it back to New Orleans, who would believe him? Without evidence, without documents, it would be his word against that of a respected plantation owner. He needed the ledgers. The ones the colonel had shown him in the study, documenting 3 generations of forced breeding. With those books, he could prove everything. Medical details, names, dates, genealogical charts that would expose not just the colonel, but every planter involved in the conspiracy. The question was how to get them. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Harrington stood quickly, wondering if the colonel had decided to deal with him preemptively. Instead, when he opened the door, he found Constance Crane standing in the hallway, a candle in her hand. "May I come in, Doctor?" she whispered. "There is something you should know." He stepped aside, and she entered quickly, closing the door behind her. In the candlelight, she looked older than she had during the day. The lines around her eyes and mouth deepened by shadow, and Harrington thought, by years of carefully controlled horror. "Mrs. Crane, if you have come to ask me to keep silent about what is happening here, I have come to help you expose it," she interrupted. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I have been a coward for 20 years, Dr. Harrington. I have told myself that there was nothing I could do, that speaking out would only result in my own destruction. I have hidden behind the excuse of providing small comforts to those girls, as though that somehow balanced the enormous wrong being perpetrated. But you are here, and you have seen everything, and I cannot remain silent any longer." Harrington felt hope stirring for the first time since arriving at Bellevue. "What do you propose?" "My husband keeps duplicate copies of his ledgers in a safe in his study. The original documents are too valuable to risk in a fire. The duplicates contain everything: the breeding records, the genealogical charts, correspondence with other planters, even financial records showing the sale and placement of children. She reached into her pocket and produced a small key. "This opens the safe. I know the location. I can get you inside the study after my husband has retired for the night." "Why are you doing this?" "If he discovers your involvement." "I know what my husband is capable of," she said quietly. "But I also know that I cannot live with this silence any longer. Those girls call me mother. They trust me, and I have betrayed that trust every single day by allowing this to continue." Harrington took the key. "When?" 2 hours after midnight. He takes laudanum to sleep. "I will unlock the study door and keep watch in the hallway. You will have perhaps 20 minutes before the household begins to stir. Can you copy the most important documents in that time?" "I can try." She nodded and turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Dr. Harrington, there is something else you should know. The girls are not his half-sisters." That is what he tells himself, what he has written in those ledgers. "But I was married to his father. I know the truth. Those girls are products of the Colonel's own experiments, children he produced with slave women in his youth. He calls them his father's daughters to justify what he does to them, but they are his own children, his daughters, and he has been breeding them since they reached 15 years old." The revelation hit Harrington like a physical blow. The Colonel was not continuing his father's work. He had created the entire nightmare himself, then constructed an elaborate fiction to make it seem like inherited obligation rather than his own monstrous design. "My God," he whispered. "There is no God in this house," Constance said. "Only monsters and their victims. I will see you at 2 o'clock. The next hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Harrington lay on his bed, fully dressed, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling as moonlight filtered through the window. Every sound made his heart race. Footsteps in the hallway, the creak of old wood settling, the distant call of an owl outside. At 10 minutes before 2, he rose and gathered what he needed. His medical bag, which contained paper and pencils for recording patient notes. The ledgers would be too large to steal in their entirety, but he could copy the most damning entries, the names and dates that would prove the conspiracy. The hallway was dark except for a single candle burning in a wall sconce near the stairs. Harrington made his way carefully toward the study, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet runner. Constance had said she would unlock the door, but as he approached, he saw it was already slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beyond. He pushed it open slowly. The study was pitch black, the heavy curtains drawn over the windows. He had brought no light, fearing it might be visible from outside. Instead, he felt his way to the desk, his hands trembling as they searched for the ledgers that had been stacked there earlier. They were gone. Panic flooded through him. Had the Colonel moved them, hidden them somewhere else? He fumbled across the desk surface, feeling papers, instruments, and inkwell, but no leather-bound books. "Looking for these, Doctor?" The voice came from the darkness near the window. A match flared, and Colonel Crane lit an oil lamp on the side table. The warm glow revealed him sitting in a leather chair, the 3 ledgers stacked on his lap, a pistol resting on the arm of the chair. "My wife has many admirable qualities," the Colonel said calmly, "but deception has never been one of them. She has been agitated all evening, jumping at shadows, unable to meet my eyes. When she claimed to have a headache and retired early, I knew something was amiss. The study seemed the most logical target, so I decided to wait and see if my suspicions were correct." Harrington's mouth had gone dry. "Where is Mrs. Crane?" "Locked in her chambers, unharmed. I do not hurt my wife, Doctor. I am not a savage. But I cannot allow her misguided conscience to interfere with my life's work." He set the ledgers aside and lifted the pistol, though he did not point it directly at Harrington. "The question now is what to do with you. I had hoped we could reach a professional understanding. You would provide medical care, I would pay you generously, and we would part as gentlemen. But it seems you are determined to make this difficult. You cannot expect me to remain silent about what is happening here," Harrington said. You are destroying the lives of your own children, creating a system of slavery that will persist for generations. I am ensuring the survival of a way of life, the colonel countered. And you, Doctor, are about to become a footnote in that work, a regrettable casualty of your own self-righteousness. Before Harrington could react, footsteps sounded in the hallway. The door burst open, and one of the overseers entered, a large man with a scarred face. "Colonel, there's trouble. One of the girls is in labor, the eldest one. She's bleeding bad." The colonel stood immediately, the pistol forgotten on the chair. "Eliza, how long has she been in labor?" "Don't know, sir. The slave woman just came running. Says it started sudden, maybe an hour ago." For a moment, the colonel's controlled facade cracked, revealing something that might have been genuine concern. "Dr. Harrington, your services are needed. We will continue our conversation later." They rushed to the east wing, and the scene that met them was chaos. Eliza lay on her bed, her face gray with pain and blood soaking through the sheets beneath her. Two slave women hovered nearby, pressing cloths against her legs in an attempt to stem the bleeding. Mother Constance was there as well, her face pale but her hands steady as she held Eliza's hand. Harrington's medical training took over instantly. He pushed past the colonel and began his examination, his fingers searching for the source of the hemorrhage. The baby's head was crowning, but something was wrong. The bleeding was too heavy, coming too fast. "Placental abruption," he said tersely. "The placenta has separated from the uterine wall. I need to deliver this baby immediately, or they will both die." For the next 20 minutes, nothing existed except the immediate crisis. Harrington worked with desperate efficiency, guiding the baby's head, clearing the airways, clamping and cutting the cord. The infant, a boy, emerged blue and silent. He cleared the mouth, rubbed the tiny chest, and was rewarded with a gasping cry that filled the room. But Eliza continued to bleed. Harrington packed the uterus, administered ergot to contract the muscles, applied pressure with every technique he knew. Slowly, agonizingly, the hemorrhage began to subside. When he finally stepped back, his hands and forearms were covered in blood, and Eliza lay unconscious but breathing. "She will live?" the colonel asked quietly. "Possibly. The next 24 hours will tell. She has lost a great deal of blood. Another pregnancy would almost certainly kill her." "Noted." The colonel picked up the infant from where one of the slave women had wrapped it in a clean cloth. He examined the baby with the same clinical detachment he might give a new foal. Strong heartbeat. Good color now. Appears healthy despite the traumatic delivery. Harrington felt rage rising through his exhaustion. That child nearly killed his mother. Your daughter nearly died because you have forced her through 5 pregnancies in 5 years. But she did not die, the colonel said. And now we have another successful specimen. The work continues, Doctor, as it must. In that moment, looking at the colonel cradling the newborn with such cold assessment, Harrington made his decision. He would not leave this plantation empty-handed. He would expose this horror, even if it cost him his own life. "I need to stay with her," he said. "Monitor her condition through the night. If the bleeding resumes, I will need to operate." The colonel nodded. "Of course. I will have someone bring you fresh water and clean linens. And, Doctor," he paused at the door, "do not think that this emergency has changed anything between us. We will finish our conversation tomorrow." After the colonel left, Harrington sat beside Eliza's bed, monitoring her pulse and breathing. Constance remained as well, sitting in the corner, her face a mask of misery. The slave women had been dismissed, and in the quiet, Harrington could hear Eliza's shallow breathing, the distant cry of the newborn from another room. "I am sorry," Constance whispered. "I have made everything worse." "You tried to help," Harrington said. "That takes courage. Courage would have been acting 20 years ago. Courage would have been refusing to participate in this from the beginning." She looked at Eliza's unconscious form. "She will never be free of him, will she? Even if she survives this, he will continue using her until her body gives out entirely." Harrington had no answer. The truth was too bleak to speak aloud. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside, Eliza stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused and confused. "The baby," she whispered. "A healthy boy," Harrington told her. "You had a difficult delivery, but you are going to recover." Something flickered across her face, an expression he could not quite read. "How long until I can have another child?" The question, asked with such resignation, nearly broke him. "Miss Eliza, you cannot have another child. Your body cannot withstand it. The next pregnancy will kill you." She turned her face away. "Then I have failed Father's work. I am useless now." "You are a human being," Harrington said urgently. "You have value beyond your ability to bear children. You could leave here. You could have a life of your own choosing. And go where?" She looked back at him, and for the first time he saw something other than perfect obedience in her eyes. "I have no money, no skills except what Father taught me, no family except the one he created. Even if I could leave, Doctor, where would I go? What would I do? I am neither white nor black. I belong nowhere except here." The Colonel had not just imprisoned her body. He had imprisoned her mind, her sense of possibility, her ability to imagine any existence beyond the walls of Bellevue. 3 days passed in an uneasy stalemate. Eliza's condition stabilized, the bleeding stopped, and her strength slowly returned. Harrington remained at the plantation, ostensibly to monitor her recovery, but actually because the Colonel made it clear he would not be permitted to leave until certain assurances were made. During those days, Harrington observed the full scope of the operation. The 9 children in the basement were subjected to daily lessons that combined standard education with constant indoctrination about their purpose and place in the world. They were taught to read, write, and calculate, but also to be obedient, grateful, and accepting of whatever role their grandfather assigned them. The 2 younger daughters, Caroline and Margaret, were brought to visit Eliza, conversations carefully supervised by the Colonel. They spoke in cheerful tones about their own pregnancies, about the importance of their work, about how blessed they were to participate in something so significant. But Harrington noticed how Caroline's hands never stopped moving, pulling at her dress, touching her hair, as though her body was trying to express the anxiety her words denied. On the 3rd evening, the Colonel summoned him to the study once more. This time the ledgers were locked away, and the pistol was nowhere in sight. Instead, a bottle of excellent brandy sat on the desk with 2 glasses. "Sit down, Doctor. I think we have reached a point where we must speak frankly about your future." Harrington remained standing. "I will not keep your secrets, Colonel. What you are doing here is monstrous, and it must be stopped. And how exactly do you plan to stop it?" The Colonel poured brandy into both glasses and pushed one across the desk. "You have no evidence. My ledgers remain in my possession. Even if you return to New Orleans with wild tales of breeding experiments, who would believe you? I am a respected landowner. You are a physician with known abolitionist sympathies, a man who might say anything to damage the institution of slavery. There are the children. Physical evidence of what you have done. The children are my grandchildren, the offspring of my daughters and various slaves. Tragic, perhaps, but hardly criminal. Many plantation owners father children with slave women. Society looks the other way. As for my daughters, they will testify that they have participated willingly in these unions, that they have been well treated and well compensated. What crime can you prove, Doctor?" The truth of it settled over Harrington like a suffocating weight. The Colonel was right. Without the ledgers, without documentation of the multi-generational conspiracy, it would be impossible to prove anything beyond the common exploitation that occurred on plantations throughout the South. "However," the Colonel continued, "I am not an unreasonable man. You have skills I value. You saved Eliza's life, which preserves years of careful breeding. I am prepared to offer you a position as permanent physician to this plantation and to the network of facilities participating in our program. Your salary would be substantial. You would have access to cases that would advance medical knowledge significantly, And you would be part of something that will reshape Southern society. You want me to become complicit in your crimes. I want you to be practical. Slavery exists, Doctor. It will continue to exist for the foreseeable future, regardless of what the abolitionists preach. I am simply trying to create a more efficient, more humane system for the inevitable future. Join us, and you can help ensure that the process is conducted with medical oversight, that the women and children are treated as well as possible within the constraints of the program. It was a devil's bargain, and they both knew it. Accept, and Harrington would have comfort, wealth, and the ability to provide some small mercies to the victims. Refuse, and he would be killed, buried in the swamps, and replaced with a physician more amenable to moral compromise. I need time to consider, Harrington said finally. You have until tomorrow evening. Give me your answer then. The colonel stood, indicating the meeting was over. In the meantime, you are free to move about the plantation. Speak with whomever you wish. Perhaps a fuller understanding of our work will help you make the right decision. That night, Harrington lay awake trying to find a solution that did not exist. He could not escape with evidence. He could not expose the conspiracy without proof. And he could not accept the colonel's offer without betraying everything he believed. The answer came from an unexpected source. Just after midnight, a soft scratching at his door brought him to his feet. He opened it to find one of the slave women from the nursery, an older woman named Clara who rarely spoke, but whose eyes always carried a deep intelligence. "Doctor," she whispered urgently, "you need to come with me. There is something you must see." She led him not to the east wing or the basement nursery, but out through the kitchen and across the dark grounds toward a small structure he had not noticed before, half hidden by live oaks draped with Spanish moss. As they approached, he realized it was an old cemetery, overgrown and neglected. Clara pushed open the rusted iron gate and led him to the back corner, where a series of small headstones marked graves barely 3 feet long. She knelt beside one and cleared away the weeds, revealing an inscription. Infant Crane, died April 1834, aged 3 months. "There are 17 buried here," Clara said quietly. "Babies born in the first years of the colonel's work. Babies with defects, or the wrong color skin, or behavioral problems that suggested they would not be controllable. He called them failures, mistakes in the breeding program that needed to be corrected." Harrington felt his blood turn to ice. He killed his own grandchildren. "Not all of them died naturally, Doctor. Some were smothered in their sleep. Some were given medicine that stopped their hearts. I know because I was there. I helped bury them, and I have kept count of every single one." She reached into her apron and pulled out a small book, its pages covered with careful handwriting. "I have written down every birth, every death, every child that passed through this place in the last 15 years, names, dates, descriptions. Everything the colonel records in his ledgers I have recorded here. Why are you showing me this? Because you are the first person to come to this plantation who saw what was happening and was horrified by it, because I have been waiting 15 years for someone who might have the power to stop this. And because if you take his offer tomorrow, if you become part of this system, then there is no hope left for any of us." She pressed the book into his hands. "Take this. Get it to someone who can help. Someone who will believe you. I do not care what happens to me. I am an old woman, and I have lived too long with these secrets already. But those girls upstairs, those children in the basement, they deserve a chance at a different life." Harrington looked down at the small book in his hands. It was evidence. Real, documented evidence that could corroborate his testimony. The graves were evidence. The bodies of murdered infants, if they could be exhumed and examined. How do I get off this plantation alive? There is a boat that comes every Thursday to deliver supplies. Tomorrow is Thursday. The boat docks at dawn, unloads for 2 hours, then continues upriver. If you can get to the dock, if you can convince the captain to take you, you might escape before the colonel realizes you are gone. He will know I spoke with you. He will punish you." Clara smiled, and it was a terrible expression. "Doctor, I have been a slave for 63 years. I have survived things that would break most people. Let me do this one good thing before I die. Let me help you stop this." The next morning, as the sky was just beginning to lighten, Harrington made his way toward the river dock. He carried only his medical bag and Clara's book, hidden in an interior pocket. The plantation was quiet, the slaves not yet called to the fields, the overseer's shack still dark. The supply boat was already there, a modest paddle-wheeler with peeling paint, and a captain who looked like he had been working the river for 40 years. Harrington approached quickly, his heart pounding. "I need passage to New Orleans. Immediately. I will pay whatever you ask." The captain looked him up and down, taking in his disheveled appearance, the desperation in his voice. "You running from something?" "I am a physician. I was hired to attend a difficult birth. Now I am being held here against my will. Please, I must get back to the city." The captain spat tobacco juice over the rail. "That plantation has a bad reputation on the river. Strange things happen there. People go in and don't come out. I don't ask questions, and I don't want trouble. But I will take you for $5 cash." Harrington pulled out his wallet and paid without hesitation. As he climbed aboard, he looked back at the plantation house, its white columns gleaming in the dawn light. Somewhere in that beautiful, terrible place, 3 young women were waking to another day of imprisonment. 9 children were beginning lessons in obedience, and a colonel was documenting his monstrous work with scientific precision. The boat pulled away from the dock, its paddle wheel churning the brown water of the Mississippi. Harrington allowed himself one moment of relief. He had escaped. He had evidence. Now he needed to find someone who would listen, someone with the power to act. What he did not know was that his escape had already been discovered, and that the colonel's reach extended far beyond the boundaries of Bellevue Plantation. The 6-hour boat journey back to New Orleans gave Harrington time to read Clara's book in detail. What he found was worse than he had imagined. The dates and names documented a systematic program of infanticide that spanned more than a decade. Babies born with darker skin than desired. Infants who cried too much, who seemed too willful, who failed to meet the colonel's exacting standards. All of them dead before their first birthday, their graves hidden in that overgrown cemetery. But Clara had documented more than just deaths. She had recorded the names of the men who visited Bellevue to discuss the colonel's methods. Plantation owners from across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. A state senator from Baton Rouge, a federal judge from New Orleans, a banker who controlled half the credit in the region. The conspiracy was even larger than the colonel had suggested. When the boat finally docked in New Orleans, Harrington went straight to the office of the district attorney, a man named James Whitfield, who had a reputation for integrity. But when he requested an urgent meeting, he was told that Whitfield was unavailable, out of the city on business, not expected back for a week. Frustrated, Harrington tried the police. The chief of police listened to his story with an increasingly skeptical expression, then asked to see his evidence. When Harrington produced Clara's book, the chief flipped through it and shook his head. "This is the journal of a slave. It would not be admissible in any court in Louisiana. Slaves cannot testify against white men, doctor. You must know that. But the graves, on private property. I would need a warrant to search Bellevue Plantation, and no judge will issue one based on accusations from an abolitionist physician and notes written by a slave." The chief closed the book and pushed it back across the desk. "My advice, Dr. Harrington, is to let this go. You do not want to make an enemy of Colonel Crane." The door to the chief's office opened, and a man Harrington had never seen before entered without knocking. He was perhaps 50, impeccably dressed with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. "Chief, if you will excuse us, I would like a word with Dr. Harrington in private." The chief stood immediately, gathering his papers. "Of course, Judge Cartwright. The office is yours." Judge Cartwright. The name was in Clara's book. A visitor to Bellevue in June 1843 and again in September 1844. Harrington felt his stomach drop. After the chief left, Judge Cartwright sat in his chair and steepled his fingers, studying Harrington with cold eyes. "You have caused quite a bit of trouble, Doctor. Colonel Crane sent word this morning that his physician had absconded with stolen property. He is naturally quite concerned. The property in question documents multiple murders." "Documents," the judge interrupted, "written by a slave and therefore worthless in any legal proceeding. But more to the point, Doctor, you are meddling in matters that do not concern you. What Colonel Crane does on his own property with his own family is his affair. The law is quite clear on this. The law does not permit infanticide. The law permits a man to discipline his property as he sees fit. If slave children die in the course of plantation operations, that is regrettable, but not criminal." The judge leaned forward. "However, I am not here to debate the law with you. I am here to offer you a choice. You can return to your medical practice, forget everything you saw at Bellevue, and live a long, prosperous life. Or you can continue this crusade, in which case I will ensure that you are charged with theft, trespassing, and slander. You will lose your medical license. You will be ruined financially and socially, and you will still accomplish nothing, because no one in this city will help you. You are part of it," Harrington said quietly. "You have invested in the Colonel's program. You have children placed in your household." The judge smiled. "I have 2 lovely nieces staying with me, orphaned relatives from a branch of the family that fell on hard times. They are charming girls, well-educated and beautiful. In a few years they will make excellent marriages, bringing fresh blood into the old families of New Orleans. No one questions their presence in my home. No one ever will. And if I go to the newspapers, if I make this public, then you will be dismissed as a madman. The newspapers in this city are owned by men who share the Colonel's vision for the future of the South. Your story will not be printed. Your name will be destroyed. And you will find that accidents can happen to people who cause problems for powerful men." The judge stood. "Go home, Dr. Harrington. Treat your patients. Forget about Bellevue. That is my strong recommendation." After the judge left, Harrington sat in the empty office, holding Clara's book and feeling the walls close in around him. Every avenue was blocked. Every authority was either complicit or powerless. The conspiracy was too deep, too well protected. He thought of Eliza, recovering from a delivery that had nearly killed her, already being told when she would be impregnated again. He thought of the 9 children in the basement, learning to accept their fate. He thought of the 17 graves in the overgrown cemetery. There had to be a way. There had to be someone who would listen. The answer came to him as he walked back to his rooms in the French Quarter. The abolitionists. The very people he had been afraid to associate with publicly, fearing they would destroy his practice. They were the only ones who might act without caring about the social consequences. That night, Harrington attended a secret meeting of the New Orleans Anti-Slavery Society in the back room of a bookstore on Chartres Street. 30 people were crammed into the small space, men and women from various backgrounds, all united by their opposition to slavery. He told them everything: the breeding program, the forced pregnancies, the murdered infants, the conspiracy of planters and judges. He showed them Clara's book. He gave them names and dates. When he finished, there was a long silence. Finally, an older man with a Boston accent spoke. "This is beyond anything we have dealt with before. We need to get this information to the national organization, to the newspapers in New York and Philadelphia. This could be the scandal that finally turns public opinion against slavery as an institution." "It will take weeks to coordinate that kind of campaign," a woman said. "By then, the Colonel will have destroyed all evidence. He will have moved the children, silenced the witnesses. Then we move faster," Harrington said. "We raid the plantation. We rescue the women and children. We take the ledgers by force if necessary. That is illegal. It is vigilantism. It could get people killed. People are already being killed." Harrington's voice rose. "Children are being murdered. Women are being raped by their own father. How much worse does it have to get before we act?" The debate continued for hours. Some argued for legal action, for working within the system. Others insisted on immediate, direct intervention. Finally, a compromise was reached. A small group would travel to Bellevue, attempt to rescue the women and gather evidence, while simultaneously sending documentation to abolitionist newspapers in the North. It was decided that Harrington would lead the rescue mission. He knew the layout of the plantation, the location of the East Wing, the schedule of the overseers. A freed slave named Marcus, who had experience moving people along the Underground Railroad, would assist. Along with 6 others, they would leave within 2 days. But as Harrington returned to his rooms that night, he had the uneasy feeling that he was being watched. Shadows seemed to move in the darkened doorways. Footsteps echoed behind him on the cobblestone streets. The colonel's reach was long, and Judge Cartwright had resources throughout the city. The trap was being set, though Harrington did not yet know it. 2 nights later, a group of 8 men gathered at the riverbank 3 miles south of Bellevue Plantation. They had traveled separately, avoiding the main roads, meeting at the appointed place just after midnight. The plan was simple. Approach through the fields, enter through the kitchen which Clara had promised to leave unlocked, make their way to the East Wing, and extract the 3 women before the overseers could respond. Harrington had a separate objective. While the others focused on the rescue, he would go to the study and take the ledgers. With both the women and the documentary evidence, they would have everything needed to expose the conspiracy. The night was humid and moonless, perfect for their purpose. They moved through the sugarcane fields in single file, guided by Marcus, who seemed able to navigate in complete darkness. The plantation house loomed ahead, most of its windows dark except for a few lights on the ground floor. As they approached the kitchen door, Harrington felt a moment of deep unease. Everything was too quiet. No dogs barked, no watchman called out. It felt like walking into a trap. The door was unlocked, as promised. They filed inside, water dripping from their clothes after wading through the irrigation ditches. The kitchen was dark and empty. So far, so good. They split into 2 groups. Marcus and 4 others headed toward the East Wing. Harrington and 2 companions made their way toward the study. The hallways were silent, their footsteps muffled by carpet runners. The study door was closed but not locked. Harrington pushed it open slowly, expecting darkness. Instead, lamps were lit, and Colonel Crane sat behind his desk exactly as he had 3 nights before, the ledgers stacked in front of him. "Good evening, Dr. Harrington. I have been expecting you." Before Harrington could react, armed men emerged from the shadows. 4 overseers, each carrying rifles, blocked every exit. The 2 men with Harrington were seized immediately, disarmed and forced to their knees. "Did you really think I would not anticipate this?" the colonel asked mildly. "Judge Cartwright warned me that you had contacted the abolitionists. We have had people watching you since you returned to New Orleans. Your clumsy conspiracy has been transparent from the beginning." "Where are the others?" Harrington demanded. "What have you done to them? Your friends are being detained in the East Wing. They will join you shortly. No one has been harmed, though that may change depending on how cooperative you are willing to be." The colonel stood and walked around the desk. "You have forced my hand, Doctor. I had hoped we could reach an understanding that you would see reason. Instead, you have chosen to become a threat to everything I have built. You cannot kill all of us. 8 people missing will raise questions. 8 abolitionists who attempted an illegal raid on a private plantation, who were caught in the act and died when they resisted arrest? I assure you, Doctor, no questions will be raised. The local authorities are well compensated to look the other way. Your bodies will be buried in the swamps, and within a week, no one will remember your names." The door opened, and the rest of Harrington's group was marched in at gunpoint. Marcus had blood running down his face from a blow to the head. The others looked terrified but unharmed. "Now then," the colonel said, "before we conclude this unpleasant business, I'm curious about one thing. How did you get the slave woman's book? Clara claims she has no idea how it disappeared from her possession." "I took it," Harrington said. "She had nothing to do with my escape." "Doctor, please, do not insult my intelligence. Clara has been troublesome for years, watching everything, recording details. I have known about her journal for quite some time. I allowed her to keep it because it amused me, because I thought a slave's testimony was worthless in any case. But now she has betrayed my trust, and there must be consequences. He nodded to one of the overseers. Bring the old woman. Minutes later, Clara was dragged into the study. Her face was bruised, her clothing torn. But her eyes were clear and defiant as she looked at the colonel. You have been a thorn in my side for 15 years, the colonel said to her. You have documented my work, judged me, condemned me with your self-righteous silence. Did you think your little book would make a difference? Did you think anyone would care about the observations of an old slave? I think, Clara said clearly, that you are a monster who will burn in hell for what you have done. And I think that one day, whether I live to see it or not, the truth about this place will destroy everything you have built. The colonel struck her across the face, a vicious blow that sent her sprawling to the floor. The truth is what I say it is. The truth is that I have created a system that will reshape the South, that will ensure our prosperity for generations. Your opinion, your book, your testimony means nothing. He turned to the overseers. Take them all to the old tobacco barn, lock them inside, at dawn, burn it to the ground. Make it look like they were hiding there and the fire started accidentally. Anyone who investigates will find the charred remains of abolitionists who died attempting their raid. As the overseers began to herd the prisoners toward the door, something happened that no one had anticipated. Eliza appeared in the doorway of the study. She was wearing a nightgown, her face still pale from her recent delivery, one hand braced against the doorframe for support. Father, she said quietly, please stop. The colonel turned, surprise evident on his face. Eliza, you should be resting. Return to your room immediately. No. Her voice was soft but steady. I have listened to everything. I heard what these men came to do. I heard what you plan to do to them. And I understand now what I have refused to understand for 22 years. She walked into the room, moving slowly but with determination. You told us we were participants in great work. You told us we were blessed, chosen, special. You told us our children would be free and prosperous. But it was all lies, wasn't it, Father? We are not your daughters. We are your prisoners. Our children are not your grandchildren. They are your property. And when we are used up, when our bodies can no longer bear children, you will dispose of us, just like you disposed of the babies who did not meet your standards. Eliza, you are ill. You are not thinking clearly. Return to your room, and we will discuss this when you have recovered. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in my life. She turned to Harrington. Doctor, when you told me I could leave, that I could have a different life, I thought you were mad. But you were right. I can leave. I can choose. And I choose to tell the truth about what has happened here. The colonel's face went white with rage. You ungrateful. I am not ungrateful, Father. I am awake. Eliza's voice grew stronger. Caroline and Margaret are awake too. We have been talking, the three of us, since the delivery. We have been remembering things we were told to forget. We have been questioning what we were taught to accept. And we know now that we were never daughters. We were experiments. We were breeding stock. And our children deserve better than to repeat our lives. I seize her, the colonel ordered the overseers. She is delirious from blood loss. She does not know what she is saying. But the overseers hesitated. Something had shifted in the room, a change in the balance of power so subtle that it could barely be named. Eliza's simple act of defiance had cracked the colonel's absolute authority. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus moved. Despite his injury, he lunged at the nearest overseer, grappling for the rifle. The study erupted into chaos. Harrington threw himself at another guard. The abolitionists, seeing their chance, fought back with desperate strength. A shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. One of the overseers fell, clutching his leg. The rifle clattered to the floor, and Harrington seized it, turning it on the colonel. Enough! His voice cut through the chaos. Everyone stop moving now! Slowly, the fighting ceased. The overseers backed away, seeing their employer held at gunpoint. The colonel stood frozen, his face contorted with fury and something else, fear perhaps, or the realization that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. "Eliza," Harrington said, not taking his eyes off the colonel. "Can you walk? Can you get your sisters and bring them here?" She nodded and disappeared into the hallway. Minutes later she returned with Caroline and Margaret, both in nightgowns, both looking terrified, but determined. "Tell him," Eliza said to her sisters. "Tell him we know the truth." Caroline spoke first, her voice shaking. "We found Mother Constance's diary last week, hidden in her room. She wrote everything, how we were really born, who our real mother was, what Father did to her. We know we are not his daughters. We know our children are products of rape," Margaret added, "and we know about the babies in the cemetery, the ones who were killed because they were not perfect enough. We counted 17 graves, Father, 17 of our own children murdered." The colonel's composure finally shattered. "You understand nothing. I gave you everything, education, comfort, purpose. I could have treated you as slaves, but instead I raised you as daughters. I gave your children a future they could never have had otherwise." "You gave us a prison," Eliza said quietly, "and you called it love." Harrington kept the rifle trained on the colonel as Marcus began binding the overseers with rope from the barn. "We are leaving here tonight, all of us. The women, the children from the nursery, anyone who wants to escape this place, and we are taking those ledgers with us. You will never make it off this plantation," the colonel said. "I have allies throughout Louisiana. Judge Cartwright will have warrants issued for your arrest before you reach New Orleans. Every sheriff, every constable will be looking for you." "Perhaps," Harrington said, "but we will have your ledgers. We will have the testimony of your daughters. We will have evidence of murdered children. Even if the courts refuse to act, the newspapers in the North will print every detail. Your name will become synonymous with the worst excesses of slavery. Every planter who participated in your program will be exposed. You wanted to create a legacy, Colonel. You will have one, but not the one you imagined." For a long moment the two men stared at each other. Then Constance Crane appeared in the doorway, holding a candle. Her face was calm, almost serene. "It is over, Thaddeus," she said. "Let them go." "You," the colonel hissed. "You planned this. You helped them. I tried to help them days ago, and you stopped me. But yes, when I heard the commotion tonight, I unlocked the nursery. The children are already being moved to the boats. Clara is with them. Your life's work is ending, and I am glad to see it die." The colonel lunged at her, but Harrington stepped between them. "Touch her and I will shoot you where you stand." The evacuation took 3 hours. The 9 children from the nursery, ranging from infants to 4 years old, were bundled into boats along with Eliza, Caroline, and Margaret. Clara supervised the removal of the ledgers, all 3 volumes, along with any documents that might serve as evidence. The abolitionists worked with practiced efficiency, the product of years moving escaped slaves along the Underground Railroad. As dawn began to break over the Mississippi, Harrington took one last look at Bellevue Plantation. The white columns gleamed in the early light, beautiful and terrible. The colonel had been locked in his own study, bound and gagged, to be discovered by his remaining slaves in a few hours. Constance had chosen to remain, claiming that someone needed to answer the questions that would inevitably come. The boats pushed away from the dock, heading downriver toward New Orleans and whatever uncertain future awaited them all. The scandal broke slowly, then all at once. Harrington delivered the ledgers to the abolitionist newspaper in New York, and within a week, excerpts were being reprinted across the North. The details were too horrifying, too well documented to dismiss as abolitionist propaganda. 3 generations of forced breeding, 17 murdered infants, a conspiracy involving some of Louisiana's most prominent families. The South's response was immediate and predictable. Newspapers in New Orleans and Baton Rouge denounced the story as lies and forgeries. Judge Cartwright issued a statement claiming the documents were fabricated. Colonel Thaddeus Crane, through his attorneys, denied all accusations and filed suit for slander against every newspaper that printed the story. But the damage was done. The careful network the colonel had built began to unravel as planters distanced themselves from the scandal. The three girls who had been placed in prominent families were quietly sent away, their true origins suddenly too dangerous to ignore. Two of the participating planters died under mysterious circumstances, one in a hunting accident, another from a sudden illness, leading to speculation about whether they had been silenced to protect others in the conspiracy. Eliza, Caroline, and Margaret were relocated to a safe house in Philadelphia, where they began the slow, painful process of building new lives. The Abolitionist Society provided financial support and education. The 9 children were placed in various homes throughout Pennsylvania and New York, given new names, new identities, a chance to grow up free from the legacy of Bellevue. Clara lived only 6 months after the escape. She died peacefully in her sleep in a small house provided by the abolitionists, satisfied that her testimony had finally been heard. Her journal, along with the colonel's ledgers, was eventually donated to the American Anti-Slavery Society, where it remained in their archives as evidence of slavery's worst capabilities. Dr. Samuel Harrington never returned to Louisiana. His medical license was revoked by the Louisiana Medical Board, and criminal charges were filed against him for theft and conspiracy. He remained in Philadelphia, working in charity hospitals and continuing to provide medical care to escaped slaves moving through the Underground Railroad. He never married, never fully recovered from what he had witnessed at Bellevue, but he continued working until his death in 1867, 2 years after slavery was finally abolished. Colonel Thaddeus Crane was never formally charged with any crime. Louisiana authorities declined to investigate, claiming lack of jurisdiction and insufficient evidence. He lived at Bellevue until his death in 1852, a broken man whose legacy had turned to ashes. The plantation was sold after his death, divided into smaller parcels. The mansion eventually abandoned and left to decay. By the turn of the century, nothing remained but ruins slowly being reclaimed by the swamp. Constance Crane left Louisiana shortly after the scandal broke. She returned to her family in New Orleans, where she lived quietly until her death in 1859. In her will, she left a substantial sum to the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, along with a letter apologizing for her years of silence and complicity. The letter was never published, but it remained in the Society's files, a testament to the price of moral cowardice. The 3 daughters rebuilt their lives slowly. Eliza married a schoolteacher in 1848 and had 2 more children, both raised in freedom with full knowledge of their mother's history. She lived until 1891, long enough to see her grandchildren attend university. Caroline became a teacher herself, working in schools for freed slaves after the Civil War. Margaret struggled more than her sisters, the trauma of her early life never fully healing, but she found peace in later years, working with an abolitionist church in Boston. The children from the nursery scattered across the country. Their fates varied. Some thrived, others struggled with the psychological scars of their early conditioning. A few, when they reached adulthood, attempted to find the graves of siblings they barely remembered, traveling to Louisiana only to discover that the cemetery at Bellevue had been plowed under, the headstones destroyed, the bodies relocated to an unmarked mass grave when the property was sold. The story of Bellevue Plantation faded from public memory after the Civil War, buried beneath the larger horrors of the conflict and Reconstruction. The ledgers remained in archives, occasionally examined by historians, but never widely publicized. The full scope of the colonel's conspiracy, the number of participating planters, the extent of the network, the fate of all the children produced by the program, was never fully uncovered. In 1923, a researcher going through old abolitionist records discovered Clara's journal and the colonel's ledgers. She attempted to write a comprehensive history of the Bellevue breeding program, but publishers rejected the manuscript as too disturbing, too controversial. The documents returned to the archives, where they remained largely forgotten for another 70 years. Today, Bellevue Plantation exists only as a footnote in histories of slavery, a cautionary tale about the extremes to which human beings will go in pursuit of power and control. The land where the mansion once stood is now part of a wildlife preserve. Spanish moss still hangs from the live oaks. The river still flows past the place where the dock used to be. And somewhere beneath the undergrowth, 17 small graves remain unmarked and unremembered. What do you think of this story? Do you believe something like this could have really happened in the hidden corners of plantation society? The archives suggest it did, though the full truth may never be known. Leave your comment below with your thoughts. If you found this tale as chilling as we did, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates the darkest chapters of history. The past has many secrets still waiting to be uncovered, and we will continue bringing them to light, one story at a time. See you in the next video.